Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and we continue with part 6 of my Takashi Miike filmography review. Now in the last video, I covered a mixed bag of titles, some good, some bad. Well, the films that we will be looking at tonight are all worth watching to a greater or lesser extent, but hopefully I can give you just enough information on each title to help you choose which ones you might want to check out. Now, there are a lot of gangster flicks to review tonight, or movies that involve gangsters in some way. And remember, all of the movies that I discuss will be listed in the description box below. So we begin with a period piece, actually, and that is Sabu from 2002. This is a drama. Now, being set in the samurai era, this film follows the life of Eiji, played by Tatsuya Fujiwara, an inmate of Ishikawa Island prison labor camp. Now, having been incarcerated for a crime that he did not commit, his faithful friend from the outside world, Sabu, played by Satoshi Sumabuki, visits him and offers assistance. Now, one problem early on is that no one knows where Eiji is imprisoned or why he was fired from his job, complicating matters even further. And if Sabu pushes his investigation too hard, he might just meet the same fate. Now, this is communicated very early on that our protagonists have endured very difficult lives. We see that they either lost their parents at a very young age and or were sent off to work long hours instead of enjoying their youthful years. Unfortunately, their adult years are no easier. Now, one of the overall themes in this film is how helpless and poor the masses were in this time period. And it's not like they had any society established safety nets or anything to help them make ends meet, in times of need. If they wanted to have enough food to survive, they had to work their butts off, and that's basically all that you could do. Work your butts off for, just enough money to barely survive. So things were not good. Now, our protagonists also get pushed around and beaten a lot, to add insult to injury, which helps to establish some gripping conflict right from the start. They're practically treated as subhuman by the classes above them. Now, one interesting element that you may not expect going into this is how some of the character dynamics within the prison change along the way. It's not as straightforward as you might think going in. Some of the characters that you dislike early on, you may actually like a little bit more as things progress. So that helped to give the film some nuance. Performances by the cast are good. I've covered Fujiwara and Sumabuki plenty of times on this YouTube channel, and while I do think that Sumabuki is the better actor between the two, they both come off well in this one. And even though this was made for television, it feels like a theatrical film. Cinematography is better than you might expect in that case. On the negative side, I would say that the plot moves very slowly and does feel a bit long at over 2 full hours. Also, there's a plot turn down the stretch that seems to come out of left field a little bit. I wasn't entirely convinced with that plot turn. And I thought it was a bit inconsistent with one particular character's personality throughout the rest of the film, in my opinion. But overall, Sabu is good quality stuff that provides more evidence that Miike can do more conventional mainstream movies fairly well. Now, the availability of this film is that it is widely available on DVD. And remember, all of the availability that I check usually is the American availability. So if you can't get it in your own country, sometimes you might be able to import it from the US. Next film tonight is one that I like quite a bit, and that is Graveyard of Honor, again from 2002. This is a crime drama. Now, this is actually a remake of the 1975 original film, previously directed by Kinji Fukasaku, which concerns an uncontrollable, volatile Yakuza henchman whose dishonorable actions earn him a lot of enemies. Now, early on, we see our protagonist working as a dishwasher in a restaurant. A hitman, played by Takashi Miike himself, busts in and starts killing the customers with the goal of reaching and eliminating the Yakuza boss who's having dinner there. Well, our protagonist gets irritated by this, so he grabs a chair and bashes the hitman's head in. And as a token of his appreciation, the Yakuza boss gives him a good position within his gang, and after that, he continues to rise up the ladder of the crime syndicate by performing murders of rival Yakuza bosses. At the same time, he sets his romantic sights on a bar hostess. Now, make no mistake about it, the main character in this movie is a very bad man who is completely out of control. And that's kind of where everything, flows from. Everything revolves around this guy's volatile behavior. He loses his temper a lot, beats people, and even rapes women at the drop of a hat. Now, he does crack a demented smile once in a while when he does these things, but most of the time, he feels more like a force of nature who makes everyone else's lives difficult while at the same time completely destroying himself in the process. He's quite a reprehensible human being, which is, a dodgy foundation for an entire film to revolve around, but he's introduced in a mature state of nihilism, I would say, and his impulsive acts of violence create a captivatingly chaotic environment for the surrounding characters to deal with. I've read multiple critic reviews who have pointed out that the protagonist's life in Graveyard of Honor actually mirrors the bursting of the Japanese economic bubble that occurred in the early 1990s that crippled many aspects of that country for over a decade. If that's what Miike was going for here, then I think the parallels work well. But even if you ignore that aspect, this movie has some other things to offer. There's high-quality acting across the board, and that includes the lead actor, who appeared in a few of Miike's other films. I also wondered how things were going to play out with the Yakuza conflict. Is this guy going to bite the dust eventually, or is he just going to take everyone down that's in his way? And again, I think that's really the most interesting aspect of this film is his effects on everyone else. You know what I mean? Now, one criticism that I can see coming from a mile away is that no one in this movie really has much of a character arc. There is a distinct lack of multidimensionality here. Even the romantic relationship begins almost with like an assault, and the protagonist's brutish feelings for this woman are not enough to really create an enduring character out of him along the way. So there's really not an arc to this guy. The woman herself is kind of, a shell of a human being from the start, too. So the critics of this movie do have some ground to stand on, but if you can consider the symbolic elements and the force of nature components that I previously mentioned, there's a chance you'll really enjoy this. I recently reviewed a film called Destruction Babies on my channel, which had a similar lead character. It has some similarities. But the violence in that film was essentially random, really. Had little to no effect on the dynamics between most of the characters, whereas Graveyard of Honor, each act of violence creates a greater rift between this guy and, the people in his organization. So that's what makes this one. Now, Graveyard of Honor, which I definitely recommend, is widely available on DVD. The original film is good too. The original film is also quite good. I might actually enjoy this reimagining or remake a little bit more, though. All right, our next film here is one that's a little lesser known, and that is Shangri-La, also known as Japan Goes Bankrupt, 2002, and this is a drama. So an out-of-work writer is walking down the street one night, and he sees some Yakuza thugs dumping garbage where a group of homeless people live. So the writer scares these guys away by impersonating a cop, and consequently gets in the good graces of this homeless clan. Now eventually, a down-and-out entrepreneur helps them out, but is facing bankruptcy due to the actions of a slimy businessman, so everyone kind of bands together to take this slimy dude down. Now, this is a gracefully low-key and lighthearted film for Miike. There's no violence or weirdness that some people associate with all of his films, Our protagonists are knowledgeable in business affairs, unbelievably, some of these homeless people, to make them effective con artists. Even the leader of the homeless people himself, who kind of has a history before his current situation that's touched upon. And that's where part of the interest here lies, their fairly complicated business plan to get even. Now, another positive is the interaction between the characters themselves. It's portrayed in a charming, everyday manner, and they're all rather likable personas. There's no one here that's really obnoxious or annoying or just, off-putting. They're all quite likable. Now, Sho Aikawa is good, as usual, as the chief of this homeless clan. There's actually a surprising, funny reveal regarding his past at one point. So if you're a fan of Aikawa's performances in Dead or Alive or like the Zebra Man films, you may want to track this one down. He's quite a good actor. I think he's a bit underrated on the international scales. I would say there's really not a whole lot more to say about Shangri-La. It's simply a good quality drama with a sprinkling of comedy along the way. So I recommend it. This one, unfortunately, is difficult to find. Keep checking YouTube and some of the streaming sites, and maybe even the DVD sites. You never know, it'll pop up somewhere. All right, our next one here is much more mainstream, I would say. This is one of the first Miike films that I saw, if I remember correctly, and that is Deadly Outlaw Rekka, again from 2002. This is kind of a crime action drama film. Now this one goes a little something like this, okay? Following the death of his boss, Kunisada, played by Riki Takuchi, embarks upon a journey of revenge against the rival gang who ordered the hit. However, all is not how it seems, as Kunisada uncovers the truth behind the shady deals that exist within his own clan. Now, pursued by two hitmen, he finds himself as first the hunter and then the hunted, as cross and double cross lead to murder and mayhem. This is a pretty basic Yakuza plot, but this one's pretty good. Now, our protagonist is a likable and flawed character. He's hot-tempered and easily manipulated, which adds some dramatic tension because you want him to find out what's going on and take out the guys who are really responsible for things. Kunisada also has Korean blood in him, and it's explicitly referenced by some of the Yakuza as a negative genetic attribute. He's not a pure blood, so to speak, so, keep him down the ladder. We don't want him to rise too much, So again, Miike uses a protagonist with mixed heritage who's trying to kind of find his way in Japan, which we've seen in multiple films already from Miike's filmography. Now, Deadly Outlaw Rekka begins with a montage that includes the assassination of the boss, as well as a scene that shows our protagonist getting really mad and thirsting for revenge. It's quite entertaining. There's also a funny scene involving dismembered hands that was quite good. Like many of Miike's films, there are some familiar faces in the cast here. In addition to Takuchi, we have Kenichi Endo as the second lead. It was nice to see him as like a likable protagonist instead of like the usual slimeball persona that he plays. Kazuya Nakayama is also quite good in this too. He was in a few other Miike films during the 2000s. Now the action, pretty basic, but it's entertaining, featuring some heavy weaponry on multiple occasions that helps to add to the intensity of those scenes. Not a lot of action in this, but it's backloaded into the final third, and there's enough to classify this as an action film. As an added bonus, we get another completely ridiculous ending by Miike, which is probably, for the purposes of unpredictability and humor on his part, I liked it quite a bit. You will not see it coming, man. Yeah, this one, I could reference a film that did something like this. I can't say anything more. It's pretty funny. My biggest gripe with Deadly Outlaw Rekka would be the pacing, okay, which is rather slow, especially during the middle section. The plot is not that complicated, and the scenes involving the Korean ladies did feel a little bit drawn out. But I definitely recommend this one. It's good. And Deadly Outlaw Rekka is widely available on DVD. All right. Our next two films are in the same series, almost like a two-part film, so to speak. Another lesser-known one. This one is called The Man in White from 2003. This is a crime drama action flick. Now, our protagonist is called Crazy Moribe because he was a bad seed in the past. When one of his men caused problems in Japan, he escaped to America, joined a local mafia group, and caused all kinds of trouble. But he subsequently reformed himself and became a sensible, proper Yakuza. Unfortunately for him, his boss is killed at the very beginning of this movie. What else? Since he was a bodyguard, he feels personally responsible and decides to track down the killer. So again, generic premise to this film, but does it do enough to be entertaining? I would say it does. Our lead actor here is Masaya Kato, who previously starred in Agitator. Again, I really like this guy. While reviewing that film, I mentioned that I'm a pretty big fan of this guy for years now. He has so much screen presence that he's able to raise the entertainment value of the film around him. I'll watch this guy in anything, you know? And as the title of the film implies, he's dressed in white for practically the entire film. Now, this Yakuza tale has engaging direction by Miike. It's energetic and solid performances all around again. There are a few familiar faces in supporting roles, too. For example, Kazuki Kitamura, who plays Kato's right-hand man during the second half of this film. I like how the hitman in this, the antagonist, is an older gentleman, which is somewhat unorthodox. You don't see that too much in movies. He's a bit of an older guy, but he's pretty dangerous. Nothing new here, as I said, in terms of plot, which is, again, rather generic. However, it does expand slightly beyond simple revenge and does not play out exactly like you'd expect. Some of the interaction between the characters was a bit different from what I was expecting. Production values are on the low side here, but there are no definitively memorable moments because of that. You know, I think that the budget might have held this one back a little bit. But it satisfies as an entertaining gangster flick. Now that just leads us right into the sequel, right? So let's just get right into it here. Man in White 2, Requiem for the Lion. This is from 2003, same year. This is a crime action drama. So the story here follows immediately after its predecessor. In fact, both parts could be considered one gigantic film. Now, the opening 10 or so minutes provide a flashback summary of the important events that occurred during the last film. Our protagonist, played by Masaya Kato again, returns with his right-hand man, played by Kazuki Kitamura again, to continue his assault on the Sojin Yakuza group. Now, this continues to play out, again, a bit differently from what you might have expected from the prior film. There are a few enemies that continue to work together against a common enemy. So you might have two guys who hate each other, but they kind of work together because they have a common enemy. So what is that saying? The enemy of my enemy is my friend, I guess you could say. That's how it is. I thought it was pretty cool to see that. I always like how that happens sometimes in movies. We have two guys who have an established conflict, and they have to work together. And that element is developed even more in the second film. It feels actually a little bit more natural because you're used to it at this point. Another proficient hitman makes his presence known in this one. Similar to the other hitman, he is older in age again, but this guy has blue hair and turns out to be quite a worthy opponent to everyone involved. Characters here definitely bleed a certain coolness about them. It's kind of stylishly presented, which almost makes... it almost always seems to be the case when Masaya Kato is present. Remember, Kato, he's a very manly dude, you know. He's got nice style about him. He's a nice dresser. So anytime he's in a film, usually the style factor goes up quite a bit too. And in terms of the Yakuza conflicts themselves, they're even more violent and plentiful in this part 2. More action in this installment for sure. Less maneuvering and more head-to-head gun battles. So, you know, the first film, maybe there was a little bit more behind-the-scenes maneuvering and manipulation by these gangsters. And in this one, people are kind of going head-to-head more. A few of the gun battles are pretty lengthy, too, which is good. And there are a few explosions that surprised me, too. So, you look out for that. So yes, this is another one of those entertaining two-part gangster flicks from Miike. You know, he's done a handful of these, as we've covered so far. You could probably skip some of the lesser ones, like We're No Angels, or New Third Yakuza, or Family. I wouldn't really recommend those. If you want a two-part gangster flick, you check out Agitator, The Man in White, or maybe Ambition Without Honor, if you have the opportunity. Now, the DVD availability of these Man in White films is that they're difficult to find. Keep checking YouTube, though. They'll pop up again, I'm sure. All right. We got a big one coming up here. So I covered, so far, I would say Graveyard of Honor is my favorite film that I've covered so far tonight. And then, you have some gangster flicks, and then obviously the period piece in Sabu. A lot of people really like that one when they eventually watch it, because it's not one that pops out at you from his filmography list. But this next one's a big one. It's pretty big, and we got to cover it. So it is called Gozu from 2003. This is kind of a horror film, really. A little bit of drama, I guess, mixed in. Now, I already reviewed this film in my Asian Horror Year in Review playlist from 2003, but I'll summarize my review here as well for your convenience. So, two low-level Yakuza, one of which is psychologically unstable and paranoid, are sent out of town on a task, but encounter some strange folk. So our main character here is Minami, a man who highly respects his colleague Ozaki, who has saved his life in the past. Now, however, Ozaki's odd behavior, like claiming that a Chihuahua is a Yakuza attack dog, have been making everyone wonder about his sanity, rightfully so. Now, the chairman is unsympathetic to these little outbursts and secretly orders Minami to take Ozaki to a disposal facility in the city of Nagoya and just wipe him out. So there, the fate of these two follows a twisted path filled with many weird events. Alright, so this film begins with one of the funniest dog scenes ever filmed, in my opinion. I was laughing hysterically during that scene. It has a cameo by Gozu himself, and yes, Gozu is a mythological entity that has its own history outside of the film, and it ends with a pretty cool horror sequence. So those are the positives of Gozu. Unfortunately, I classify this one alongside Visitor Q as being one of the more highly acclaimed Miike films that I simply could not get into, man. I could not get into this movie. I've already read a lot of articles and reviews that go into like the symbolism and themes of the film, but I think my main problem is that it was not portrayed in an engaging manner to me. It kind of bored me, basically, for most of the runtime. I mean, yeah, sure, we do get a few memorable sequences that stand out, but there's not enough to intrigue me for 2 full hours. I mean, this movie's like 120 minutes long, and there might be like 20 minutes of good stuff in there. I suppose the journey of our protagonist is what failed to grab me the most. The dialogue seemed kind of pointless along the way, and his interaction with the weird people, I don't know, really wasn't that interesting for the most part. But, yeah, a few scenes in this movie actually really kind of annoyed me, just like Visitor Q, where you're just like, what is this? It just seems kind of juvenile, you know what I mean? But I need to emphasize the fact that Gozu is beloved by a lot of people out there. Virtually everyone I know, well, high percentage, let's say 90% of the people I know or I've seen online tend to like it more than I do, even if they don't like it that much. And many think it's one of Miike's best. If you look at Miike top 10 lists, Gozu shows up quite a bit. So it's definitely a must-see, despite the fact that I don't like it. So I'm willing to admit that sometimes. I don't like it, but I could be wrong in many cases. So Gozu is thankfully widely available on DVD. You gotta check it out. Some people have compared that film to like David Lynch's films. So, it's just to give you an idea of how weird it can get. You know what I mean? Alright, our last film tonight is one that, again, flies under a lot of people's radars. We seem to be covering some such films tonight. And this one is called Yakuza Demon, also known as Kikoku. 2003, crime drama with some action in it. So after sacrificing 15 years of his life in prison, Seiji is part of an underachieving Yakuza trio. He and his 2 gang brothers are dirt poor but fiercely loyal to each other. When their bosses order one of them to repay a debt by assassinating a rival gangster, Seiji takes his brother's place to protect him from harm. But instead of the target, he tries to kill the leader of the rival gang who is mortally wounded in the attack. And as one might expect, his actions trigger a vicious gang war and an enemy hit squad is sent to kill him. So again, like some of the films we're covering tonight, you look at the plots and they're nothing special. So this shows how Miike can kind of take this generic gangster plot and kind of elevate it by adding a little bit of energy and some of his Miike flair that you're really not going to get in some other stuff. This film isn't one of his best Yakuza flicks, but it's certainly not one of his worst. It's kind of a bare bones by the numbers flick. It does have a little bit of difficulty distinguishing itself from other similar films in this case. This one, there's some memorable moments, but not a lot of them. In addition, the dialogue is kind of bland, which causes some pacing issues when there's no action on screen. But most fortunately, our lead protagonist is a bit more interesting than everyone else in the film. He's got a no-nonsense attitude, even going so far as to talk back to the big shots, the Yakuza bosses. So just steps right up to him, And as the plot synopsis says, he's fiercely loyal and is willing to go the distance for his Yakuza brethren. And actually, one interesting aspect is how exactly our protagonist attempts to protect his buddy. He's trying to protect one of his buddies from harm, and he does something that I don't see very often in movies, so I kind of liked it. Kind of an odd tactic. Riki Takuchi is the lead here, again, and he's entertaining as usual. Also, a lot of the people die in this movie mostly by gunshots, so there's a lot of death on display. Action design is pretty basic, but it works. There is some Gregorian chanting that is used in place of music at times, which is quite different for a Miike film, but I kind of liked it. So yes, I don't think there's enough in Yakuza Demon to warrant like a high priority viewing, but hardcore Miike fans are probably going to be more receptive to it and will enjoy it. Now the availability of Yakuza Demon, it's moderately available on DVD. Used to be widely available, but I think it went out of print. All right, so that was a quick rundown of the films tonight. So we covered eight movies, I believe. So I would say part 6 of this Takashi Miike filmography review has the following must-see films. You got Grave of Honor, a must-see. And Gozu is definitely a must-see. If you like Miike's period films and you like the dramatic aspects of them, check out Sabu. A lot of people like that one. The people who like his slower stuff tend to like Sabu quite a bit. And then the middle 4 that I covered, Shangri-La, Deadly Outlaw Rekka, and the 2 Man in White films are not high-priority titles. But, if you get your hands on them and you're in the mood for some Yakuza, drama action, or in the case of Shangri-La, a kind of a lower-key drama, check them out. If something interests you, check it out, because sometimes I find people like these films more than I do. Everybody, it's the thing with Miike, he made so many films, different kinds of films. Some people like, this film the best, some people like this film the best. It's good stuff. And be sure to join me for part 7 of my Takashi Miike filmography review, because we're going to cover some more oddball flicks. A lot of the flicks tonight were Yakuza related. The next video, it's going to be all over the place. At least 3 of those films are going to be must-sees, so it's going to get crazy. And as always, I will see you next time.